And here it is, your most recent college football playoff ranking number 4. And we got some movement. Not at number 1, though. Georgia, 11-0, still top of the crop. At number 2, the Buckeyes jumping 2 spots into the 2 spot, jumping over Alabama, who also did win in Week 12. But committee telling you right now, it's got to look good, too. And it looked real good when it comes to the Buckeyes a week ago. Cincinnati, there they are, finally on the inside of the conversation, with Oregon dropping way down the board to number 11. They were previously number 3. Now out of the question, and the answer to that question is Cincinnati. For more on CFP ranking number 4, we welcome in a pair of number 1s. CBS Sports ranking analyst Jerry Palm and our college football insider, big game Dennis Dodd. Gentlemen, there it is right out in front of us, 1 through 4 and beyond. Let's dive right in here with Ohio State, making that 2-spot jump up to number 2, a 49-point win over a top 10 team. What does this tell you about how the committee's valuing things this season, Dennis?
Well, this is the biggest jump they've made all season, and I think we were all season with Ohio State. They were putting up points, but ... after every game. They gave up 31 and 477 yards to Purdue. They were having convincing wins. But in terms of the big picture, which you also always have to evaluate Ohio State by, were they a complete team? And now that's reflected tonight by the ranking they're getting from the committee. But look, they're going to play Michigan. So you can take that spot in the top 4 and give it to whoever wins that game. Unless the Big 12 champion ends up with 2 losses or more, i.e. Wisconsin, then the Big 10 is going to be in the top 4. So, that argument is only for tonight. We're going to have results over Saturday, which is probably going to decide things further. But I think right now you can probably pencil in the Big 10, Michigan or Ohio State in the top 4 in some form.
Yeah, Ohio State really showed their peak form against the number 7 team in the country. And the committee acknowledged that. Yeah, and if you remember last week when Gary Barta was talking to the media afterwards, he said that they had a strong debate for the 2nd spot among Alabama, Oregon, and Ohio State last week. Well, Oregon played their way out of it. And if you were really close on those teams going into this week, Ohio State made a very clear case to be the number 2 team this week. But it's like Dennis said, it doesn't really matter. Now, I'm going to take some issue with what you said earlier about who controls their own destiny. There are 4 teams: Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. That's it. Everybody else, Cincinnati, the Big 12 teams, those teams can win out and still not make it. So, those 4, though, they control their own destiny in this thing. And that's been the case for quite some time. And we're going to get to see the Ohio State-Michigan game this week. We're going to get to see the Alabama-Georgia game next week. We could end up with 3 playoff teams out of those 4, or we could end up conceivably with just 1 if Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan all end up with 2 losses.
I love when we get these 2 together. They hold each other accountable, and they always bring the best information to us here on HQ. Guys, we got to talk about Cincinnati, because you said something very interesting right there, JP. Cincy's been going about their business, and you can only ignore them for so long at 11-0. The chips have finally fallen their way with Oregon stepping aside. They do become the first group of 5 team to appear in the top 4. JP, you say they don't control their own destiny here. They win out. How does the committee say no to an undefeated Cincinnati team after putting them in the 4th CFP ranking?
Because they reevaluate every week, and Cincinnati's schedule is significantly worse than everybody they're competing with. And all of these teams that they're competing with are going to be improving their schedules because they're playing the best teams in their leagues, which are much better leagues. Now, Cincinnati is also playing the 2nd best team in their league in the conference championship game, but that's a Houston team that's ranked near the bottom of these rankings. Now, the fact that Houston is in the rankings is helpful, but if you have a 12-1 Oklahoma State and a undefeated Cincinnati, and you've got a 1-loss Big 10 champion, and you've got 1-loss Georgia and 1-loss Alabama, all 3 of those teams are in. The committee's making a decision between a 12-1 Big 12 champion and an undefeated Cincinnati team that played a much worse schedule. but has that big win over Notre Dame. I think Cincinnati gets in, but I think it's premature to say that they control their own destiny.
Yeah, totally agree. I've been saying this for weeks. I said it in the last segment. If it comes to that, it's going to be a decision between a one-loss Big 12 champion, and for the Big 12 purposes, they have to hope it's Oklahoma State right now. I know they're 7 and Oklahoma's 10, but if Oklahoma makes it, they will have come from 13. That's the lowest they've been since this thing started. So they are going to be a dark horse. That would be an upset for them to get in because only 2 teams have come from further back to get into the top 4. So think Oklahoma State. And that would have to be a decision. This is a historic night, guys. No group of 5 team has ever been this high, this late. And I think we have to have a serious discussion and hold the committee accountable and get them on record tonight, or try to get Gary Barta on record tonight. Of course, he won't, about what it's going to take for Cincinnati. Jerry mentioned the schedule strength, which is not good. But do they value a Power 5 champion with 1 loss, and it would be from the Big 12, better than an undefeated team from the group of 5, which has gained, let's not forget, this New Year's 6 bid, this automatic bid in 5 of the 7 years of the CFP. So we're not talking about the Sun Belt going undefeated. We're not talking about UTSA going undefeated. We're still talking about Cincinnati, who passes the eye test in many, many ways and has stumbled only twice, just a little bit, and that was against Navy and that was against Tulsa. Nobody except Georgia and even Ohio State obviously had a loss, has been this consistent throughout the whole year. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. Somebody has to ask Gary Barta what it's going to take tonight.
All right. So,
I can tell you his answer.
Jerry?
We don't look ahead. That's
right,
bad.
exactly.
And they don't look ahead. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not an unfair answer. It's not his job to project. That's my job, and maybe yours, but it's not his job to project. So he's not going to answer that question. But the key for Cincinnati is the fact that they've got the win at Notre Dame. I mean, they need Notre Dame to beat Stanford. They need that win to look as good as it possibly can when the committee's evaluating them. That is a huge, huge thing for Cincinnati that no group of 5 team has ever had before the committee. It's the reason they are where they are. It's the reason they have possible opportunities ahead of them. But they've got to take care of their business, and they still need to look good doing it. They don't want to be in a position where they're giving the committee an excuse to put a 12-1 Oklahoma or a 12-1 Oklahoma State ahead of them.
All right, so our guys advising Cincinnati, take some pictures while you're inside the club because the party might not last. My job here at HQ is to ask you guys the questions and get the information out of you. I got a couple questions when it comes to Michigan. They're in prime position right now to sneak in pending a decision or pending a Cincy misstep, but it's all pending what happens on Saturday. The question here is, do they have enough to do what they have not done in 7 seasons and never before under their current head coach, that is beat the Buckeyes, Jerry?
Well, maybe, but I'm not buying it until I see it. They have played, though, very well. They have home field advantage, but they are still not more talented than Ohio State. Ohio State is the most talented team in the Big Ten, and there's a gap. And maybe Michigan is second, but, Ohio State's got their number. Jim Harbaugh has yet to win the game that he was hired to win. This might be his best chance, but until he actually does it, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, 2 things. This is the best team that Jim Harbaugh's had. This is his 4th year out of 7. He's won 10 games. And I think after what happened last year, the 2-4 record, tying the worst of his career, at least in winning percentage, he's rebounded nicely. It's a complete team. Cade McNamara is no longer a game manager. They run the ball well. Josh Gaddis has done well as the offensive coordinator. They have a plan. But I think what changes the entire thinking, as Jerry mentioned, is Ohio State's total performance last week. Do I think Michigan has the goods? Absolutely, I think they have the goods. But there's a historical perspective here. Ohio State had won 8 in a row by an average of almost 3 touchdowns. Michigan hasn't been competitive since the 4th down game in 2006, the 4th down spot where they lost in overtime. That has to change. I think it will change. Ohio State, I think, a 7-point favorite in this game. Jerry mentioned the home field advantage. A little bit of weather, high of 36. Don't know about wind in Ann Arbor Saturday. I am picking Ohio State. But right now, as far as the rankings go, Ohio State is Michigan and Michigan is Ohio State. Whoever that wins that game is going to be in the top 4 if they take care of business. Right now, slight lean Ohio State.
Yeah, winner of that one will also represent the East in the Big Ten championship game. And again, Ohio State, they've won 15 of the last 16 meetings between those two. We do have to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as well, because when you talk about Cincinnati and their weakness of schedule, the best strength of schedule out of any team in the top 10 belongs to the Fighting Irish. They also have a bullet point that the committee does not take into account, and that's the best loss. If you're going to consider Cincinnati a top 4 team, they have a loss to a top 4 team. They cruised since that loss to Cincinnati. What is the road ahead, Dennis, for the Fighting Irish if they want to see themselves on the inside? Yes, you have to take care of Stanford, and then you wait and see what happens on Conference Championship Saturday. But as for the Fighting Irish and their prospects moving forward, Dennis, what's it going to take for them to end up in the Final Four?
Yeah, beat Stanford and hope for a loss from Cincinnati and hope for a 2-loss champion from the Big 12. I don't see many other ways for them to get in unless the Big Ten champion has at least 2 losses, and that could be Wisconsin, that could be Ohio State or Michigan, and that's a big ask for Notre Dame to get in there. That's assuming Georgia's in, which I am, because all they have to do is beat Georgia Tech, and they are absolutely in. And unless Alabama beats Georgia, that takes away another spot. So they have to hope for something that hasn't happened this season. Cincinnati losing and chaos at the top with the Big 12, basically.
Yeah, Dennis is right about this. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't have the advantage of being a conference champion, which is one of the things that this committee values and has been instructed to value by the people who formed this committee, is that conference championships should matter. Now, they're not out to select the top 4 conference champions, but if you're talking about tiebreaker scenarios, conference championship is basically your first tiebreaker, and that's just something Notre Dame will never have. I mean, you talk about the strength of their schedule, it's a little deceiving because the top end of their schedule is Cincinnati, and Wisconsin has come on, and Purdue's come on a little bit, but they haven't got the big opponent other than Cincinnati. What they have is a lot of middle and not much of a bottom. So their strength of schedule ranks higher, but the actual quality on that schedule compared to Notre Dame is probably not as high as that ranking would indicate.
I mean, can we talk about 5 automatic bids? I mean, Power 5, conference champion, give me an automatic. It's a different conversation for a different day, gentlemen. This is how things, Dennis doesn't want it. I mean, how crazy of a day would that be? Conference championship Saturday, everybody's got to punch a ticket. We've seen wilder things. Biggest winner and loser we got to talk about here from this latest ranking. Who's walking away, Jerry, feeling the best about their situation? Doesn't have to be someone inside the top 4. Doesn't necessarily even have to be someone inside the top 10. But who walks away having taken the biggest jump, feeling the best about their case?
Well, I guess I would say Oregon and possibly Michigan State. They lost, right? So they're losers and they're out of the playoff hunt. But they've still got chances at Oregon because they're going to play for a conference championship. But Michigan State with a win over Penn State can still get a New Year's Six game. So they could have lost worse. I'd say, I guess I'm thinking of that as a win, especially as bad as they lost. Michigan State is still in play for a New Year's Six game if they can win this week. Not guaranteed, but there is still a big bowl game out there in front of them.
Yeah, biggest winner outside the top 4 is Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Beat Mississippi State on Thanksgiving night. He goes 10-2. His agent, Jimmy Sexton, just ups the ante for him going to Florida or Miami or staying at Ole Miss, but it ups the ante. Lane Kiffin is going to get paid if he wins, and they're going to go to a New Year's Six bowl, I believe, at 10-2.
All right, Jerry, taking a look at some losers now. I mean, your losers were also winners in some fashion. You did a great job of outlining that for us. But biggest loser when looking at this ranking is who?
It's definitely the Pac-12. I mean, they're out of the playoff again. Now, it took longer for it to happen this year than perhaps in the past, but they haven't been in the college football playoff since 2015. I mean, no wonder they want expansion and an automatic spot because it seems to be the only way they're ever going to get in. It's really been a struggle for the Pac-12 to be competitive at the top of college football. Oregon gave them a shot deep into this season, but ultimately they're going to be out once again.
We are 1 week deeper and 1 ranking further along, but it doesn't feel like anything's figured out just yet. You gentlemen have done a great job, but we need your prediction for your final CFP rankings. Dennis, we'll let you go first.
All right, I've already told you about Georgia. There's no way they can, or virtually no way they can move out. We are picking Ohio State. Jerry and I both like Ohio State. So there's only a couple of other ways this can go. If we assume Cincinnati's going to be undefeated, they're in, and that leaves a spot for the Big 12 champion if it's one loss. And I like Oklahoma State to be in the college football playoff. This is a with the number 2 defense, number 3 defense in the country next to Georgia, number 2. Tonight, they're ranked in the top 10, top 5, top 6, top 7. They've only been ranked in the top 5 at the end of the season in their history only twice. And the last time was 2011. They've got the goods. They're at home at Bedlam. They're favored. I think they beat Oklahoma twice and get a huge bump and get into that top 4 and play for the national championship in little old Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Well, I've got Georgia number 1, which means beating Alabama. Ohio State number 2, which means winning out as well. And then number 3, I have Cincinnati. And number 4, 2-loss Alabama, who would have to be competitive against Georgia for this to be possible. But this committee has shown, I may have to rethink it after this week, but they have shown that they love Alabama. And if they are the first team to, since Clemson, to really give Georgia a game, I think that they could stay in the top 4 even with a loss, even with a Big 12 champion with 1 loss right behind them.
Jerry, I've been beating the 2-loss Bama drums since the first ranking came out. We saw the committee insulate Alabama, maybe a little bit of subliminal there that no matter what happens, as long as that SEC title game is closely contested, that those are 2 of the top 4 teams in the country. We know our guy Dennis Dodd disagrees, but we got plenty of time to talk it out. Gentlemen, fantastic insight as always. We thank you. All right, let's take a look one more time at the odds to make the college football playoff. Georgia, a virtual lock. Minus 4,000. Don't play it. If you think they don't make it, if you think they lose their next 2 games, 18-1 is what you're going to get paid out. Ohio State, they're minus money, as is Bama, perhaps tipping a cap to what we could see in the SEC title game, or regardless of that outcome, that Alabama will be on the inside, or so says our guy Jerry Palm. Cincinnati, short plus money there at plus 125 to get the job done. If you're looking for some plus money, 4-1. Michigan. They could take down the Buckeyes. Looks like a clear road into the top 4.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.